The barrel of a gun was the last thing Agent Dorian Vance expected to see on a routine fuel stop. "Hands where I can see them." The voice came hard, slicing through the humid stillness of the East Lynn afternoon. Dorian froze mid-step, his hand inches from his jacket pocket. He didn't turn around. He didn't breathe wrong. He simply lifted both hands, slow and deliberate. Behind him, the officer's boots crunched against the gravel-strewn pavement. "Don't you move." The pistol didn't waver. Neither did Dorian. He stood in the shadow of a rusty chevron sign, sun blazing, wind low. The kind of day meant for stillness. But something violent hung in the air, like a thunderstorm no one could see yet, but everyone could feel in their bones. "Sir," Dorian said, voice level. "I'm a federal agent. Let me reach for my credentials." "You don't move," the officer snapped again. Dorian caught his reflection in the window of the black SUV. Calm, composed, controlled, but inside his chest pounded. He'd been in war zones, coordinated presidential visits, surveilled threats in 3 continents. But here, at a gas station in a quiet southern town with 1 road in and 1 road out, this was different. This was personal. Behind them, a woman's voice cracked the tension. "Is he robbing the place?" A teenager whispered. "No, I think he's a cop. Look at his car." Phone cameras blinked to life. Dorian didn't flinch. The officer, badge reading Delmore, circled closer. His fingers sat dangerously tight against the trigger guard. "You don't get to flash some badge and think that makes you clean," Delmore growled. "You fit a description." "I fit a description?" "You shut up. Keep your hands up." Something about the man's eyes. Wild. Threatened. Desperate to control something. Dorian saw it. And then, before this moment could break either way, a second voice cut in. "Eastland PD. Step down. He's with me." A woman approached fast, her badge already out, her stance all business. "Agent Reva Tran, field detail." Sharp, unflinching. Delmore swung his aim halfway toward her before realizing. You know him?" She stepped between them. "Put your weapon down. Now." And just like that, the moment ended. But not the consequences. The crowd hadn't moved. Even as Dorian lowered his arms and Tran flashed credentials to confirm everything, phones stayed up. Recording. Whispering. One man muttered, "Knew it wasn't right." A woman said, "He didn't even flinch." A teenage girl looked stunned. "I thought he was going to get shot." Delmore stood stone-faced, blinking hard, his weapon now holstered but his jaw clenched. He said nothing. Tran gave Dorian a look. "You good?" "No," Dorian turned to Delmore. "You didn't ask my name. You didn't ask for ID. You just drew." Delmore's lips parted slightly, as if to respond, but he said nothing. And then Dorian walked back to the SUV, silent. Tran followed, flipping open her phone. "I'm reporting this." "You should." Inside the vehicle, the world tilted back into motion. But it wasn't calm, because someone had recorded. A blurry video clip, 30 seconds, maybe less. Enough to show Delmore's weapon. Enough to show Dorian unmoving. And enough to capture the voice of the girl saying, "I thought he was going to get shot." By nightfall, the footage was on 5 platforms. By morning, it was everywhere. Hashtag Vance stopped. Hashtag Dorian duty. Hashtag wrong badge right man. Dorian's name trended before breakfast. His face was on every screen before lunch. And by early evening, East Lynn had more news vans than people. A local protest formed outside the police station. Hand-painted signs. Bullhorns. Voices raised. Justice for Vance. He could have been killed. You can't unsee that. Officer Ray Delmore was placed on administrative leave. No badge. No gun. No press statement. The police chief issued a 1-paragraph comment calling the incident regrettable. But it didn't help. The internet had already done its math. The man in the video didn't yell. Didn't resist. Didn't reach. And still, he had a gun pointed at his head. Inside a nondescript DHS command post, Director Halston Blake watched the footage on a loop. He turned down the sound, then looked across the table at Dorian. "You know what this is?" Dorian sat still, hands folded, eyes tired. "I didn't choose to be filmed." "No, but people are watching anyway. I'm not trying to be a symbol." "Well, you are now." A communications aide slid a folder across the table. 3 interview requests already. 1 from PBS. 2 from morning news shows. A 4th just came in from a documentary crew. "I'm not interested." "You sure?" Blake asked. "Because silence sends a message too." Dorian looked at the folder, didn't touch it. "If I say something, I say it once. My words. My way. No spin. No parade. Blake leaned back. Fair enough. But if you do, it'll have reach. That night, Dorian wrote alone. Just pen and paper. No team. No rehearsals. He didn't sleep much. 2 days later, Dorian stood at a podium in a packed community center. No flags. No press lights. Just folding chairs and quiet expectations. His voice was steady. His eyes calm. I've spent over 15 years protecting people who don't know my name, he began. That's the job. You blend in. You stay alert. You don't invite attention. But attention came anyway. Phones recorded silently. I wasn't mistaken for a threat. I was judged as one. He spoke plainly. No theatrics. Just truth. I didn't yell. I didn't move fast. I didn't get angry. And still, I was seconds away from becoming a headline. In the front row, a child sat still, her wide eyes locked on his. I don't feel rage. I feel disappointment. That a man in uniform decided I didn't belong. Not because of anything I did, but because of what he saw or thought he saw. The crowd didn't clap immediately. But when they did, it wasn't loud. It was real. Dorian ended with one line. When they lower the standard, raise yours. And then he stepped down. What followed couldn't be contained. A retired officer called the incident a disgrace. Students wrote essays about implicit bias. An op-ed in a major newspaper called Dorian's response a masterclass in dignity. Delmore's record leaked. It wasn't clean. Multiple complaints. Use of force incidents. All closed without discipline. Suddenly, Eastland PD wasn't just in the spotlight. They were under a microscope. But Dorian stayed out of it. He didn't do interviews. Didn't sign a book deal. Didn't post online. He went back to work. Quietly. Purposefully. And a week later, he stood in front of a new class of federal recruits. This job, he told them, is about more than badges and briefings. It's about seeing, not just what's obvious, but what's under the surface. One recruit raised a hand. Sir, how do you stay calm in a moment like that? You don't train for calm, Dorian replied. You train for clarity. Calm is the result. Later that evening, he sat on his sister's porch. His niece, Briar, scribbled with crayons beside him. She didn't look up when she spoke. Did people believe you? I think so. Will it happen again? Dorian paused. I hope not. But if it does, people are watching now. She handed him her drawing. Him in a suit. A police officer beside him. Big bold letters. Be better than what they think. He smiled. That's the mission. But the story wasn't done. Because 300 miles away, a body camera clip surfaced from 2 months prior. Same officer. Same pattern. Different man. Only this time, it ended with sirens. And a silence no public statement could fix. If you're enjoying this so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It really helps us grow and lets us keep bringing you more content like this. Plus, you won't want to miss what we have coming next. Trust me, it's going to be good. Rain fell hard over the motel rooftop, loud and punishing. Inside room 8, Agent Quentin Drexler sat on the edge of the bed, soaked, heart still hammering. The envelope lay open on the table, its contents scattered. Not documents. Not threats. Photos. Grainy, black and white stills of the gas station confrontation. From angles not seen in the viral video. Higher angles. Like surveillance. One showed Delmore's hand frozen mid-reach, weapon drawn. Another showed Quentin's ID badge dangling in full view. Someone had eyes on the incident. Someone who hadn't come forward. And whoever left the envelope knew where to find him. Drexler ran a towel over his face, trying to think. The knock on the door hadn't come from the front. The sound had traveled through the wall, like someone had tapped from an adjacent room. But when he checked outside moments later, the hallway had been empty. He spread the photos again. 10 in total. All time-stamped. All damning. But in the final image, one he hadn't noticed at first, a face. Barely visible in the reflection of a station window. Sunglasses, hood pulled low. Watching. Not Delmore. Not bystander. Someone else entirely. He stared at that photo longer than the rest. Then his phone buzzed. No caller ID. He hesitated, then answered. You're not supposed to see everything, said a voice. Flat. Mechanical. Masked. Quentin stiffened. You have 36 hours. After that, the story rewrites itself. Click. The line went dead. The next morning, Drexler stood in the office of Director Halston Blake. A haze of steam curled from the coffee mug in Blake's hand, but his gaze was steel. They called you? Yes. Did you record it? No. Came in blocked. Blake turned, staring out the window. Below, the agency's campus buzzed suits, recruits, drills. But in that office, silence stretched like wire. What did they say? Blake asked finally. 36 hours. To do what? Drexler opened his jacket, pulled out the photos, spread them across the desk like a poker hand no one wanted to play. Blake's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked from one frame to the next. Where did you get these? Someone left them at my motel. Knocked, vanished. And you're just now telling me? I didn't know if I could. Blake's face twitched. That reflection, Drexler continued, tapping the final photo. That's not Delmore. That's someone else. They were watching, recording, maybe more. Blake nodded slowly, then reached into a drawer, pulled out a thin folder. He slid it across the desk. Internal Affairs sent this last night. Drexler opened it. Delmore's record. 3 prior complaints in the last 5 years. All dismissed. No formal reprimand. One had involved a different traveler, a man wrongfully detained, who'd later recanted. Another involved a female officer alleging hostile conduct during a traffic stop. Buried. Unpunished. You buried this? Drexler asked. Blake met his eyes. I didn't. But someone did. Someone high enough to make it disappear. Drexler's hands clenched. There's more, Blake said. He pressed a button on the intercom. Send her in. The door opened. A woman stepped in. Late 30s. Dark suit. Sharp eyes. This is Commander Isla Noren, Blake said, tasked with deep review. She's not from internal. Noren nodded. I've been tracking Delmore's file since before this incident. Something never added up. She dropped a flash drive on the table. That contains audio from a local East Lynne dispatcher the night after your incident. 2 officers on an encrypted band discussing whether to let the feds spin it their way. One even mentioned you by name. Problem is, you hadn't gone public yet. Drexler's mouth went dry. So how did they know? Noren didn't blink. Because it wasn't random. It was targeted. Later that day, Drexler walked alone near the training range. Recruits barked commands in the distance, but his mind was elsewhere. Targeted. Surveilled. Framed. None of this had been in his script. Not his mission. He'd wanted to do his job and leave the spotlight behind. But the storm was tightening, and someone was orchestrating it. As he passed a parked government vehicle, something caught his eye in the rear seat. A laptop. Open. On the screen, a paused frame of the gas station video. But it wasn't the viral one. This had angles he'd never seen. He scanned the lot. No one around. He leaned in closer. The footage resumed on its own. He saw himself again. Calm. Badge out. Then the frame jumped. Skipped. An entire second vanished. Delmore's hand went from holstered to drawn in a blink. Then a text overlay appeared on screen. Version A, local timestamp modified. Drexler reeled back. Whoever had this footage had altered it. And not just the visuals, metadata too. Another line blinked on screen. Truth is a function of access. He looked around, but the lot was still empty. By the time he returned to the vehicle moments later with Noren, the laptop was gone. That night, in a secured conference room, Noren pulled up agency access logs. She and Drexler stared at columns of data. This is strange, she muttered. She highlighted a string of activity from 3 days prior. Someone requested video analysis permissions from a clearance level that doesn't exist. What do you mean? It's not in the clearance tree. It's like it was created temporarily, just to pass the request. A ghost login. And they accessed the gas station footage? Yes. And they redacted it. On our own servers. Drexler stood frozen. So it's not just East Lynne, he said slowly. It's someone with federal access. Noren didn't respond. Because she didn't have to. They both knew what that meant. The next morning, social media exploded. A second clip leaked. Not the original gas station footage, but a portion of it, with Delmore clearly looking at Drexler's badge and still drawing his weapon. The clip was cropped. Shaky. But real. And damning. The hashtag surged again. Hashtag Drexler Duty trended worldwide. But instead of celebration, the leak sparked chaos. Conspiracy theories bloomed. Was the video planted? Was Drexler in on it? Why did the agency stay silent? Delmore issued a brief statement through his attorney, denying all allegations, claiming deepfake manipulation. The department issued no comment. And still, no one claimed the leak. Until an anonymous email hit the agency's secure tip line. Subject: I was there. The message was a single line. Not the first time. Not the last. Meet me where he fell. Attached, a GPS coordinate. It pointed to a rest stop off a rural highway. The same highway where, 5 years earlier, a young agent had died during a routine vehicle search. The case had been closed as an accident. No foul play. But Quentin remembered, because that agent had been his friend. Drexler arrived at the rest stop after dark. Wind howled across the parking lot. Leaves skittered like whispers. He stepped from the car, flashlight in hand. Walked the path that led behind the main building. The spot was empty. No cars. No people. Just a metal bench. And a folded newspaper. He picked it up. A photo slipped from the pages. Not of the gas station, but of him, standing beside Director Blake. Smiling. The caption, "Director's successor?" He froze. Then, a voice behind him. "Back so soon?" Drexler turned, and saw someone he thought was gone. Agent Roland Kyer, presumed dead 5 years ago, buried in Arlington, and standing 3 feet away. The moment Drexler hit send, everything changed. He didn't know exactly what he was sending, only that Agent Lauren Price had encrypted it, extracted it from one of Eastland's patrol car servers, and passed it to him with trembling hands in the back lot of an abandoned diner. And now it was out there, to a dozen secure inboxes, to journalists he trusted, to Blake. The roar of approaching sirens cut through the trees like war drums. Drexler ducked behind the wheel of his car and floored it. He didn't see the first spike strip until it was too late. Tires exploded beneath him. The car lurched. He veered hard into the ditch, headlights blinding a wild path through brush. Metal crunched. Everything stopped. His head swam. Blood trickled down his temple. His seatbelt groaned as he yanked it off. Footsteps. Fast. Boots. Voices, low and military. Not police. They weren't shouting to him. They were securing the area. Drexler dropped low and crawled out the passenger side, dragging himself under the ditch's slope. His fingers brushed cold stone, an old irrigation channel. He pressed inside and slid forward, his chest scraping concrete, ears ringing. Above him, searchlights swept across the wreck. "We need him alive," a voice barked. Orders from Latchwood. No bullets unless necessary. Latchwood. That name again. Buried in files Lauren couldn't fully decrypt. It had appeared twice in the Eastland surveillance protocols. Once in a redacted memo tied to the sheriff's office. Once in a contract ledger hidden in a water authority budget line item. Who the hell was Latchwood? Drexler waited until their boots passed, then crawled out into darkness and ran. 30 miles away, Lauren Price waited in an abandoned maintenance shack by the old rail yard. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She'd scrubbed all traces of the files from her laptop, burned the hard drive with a torch she'd stolen from her cousin's auto shop, smashed her phone. She wasn't taking chances. What Drexler had just sent out, if it landed, wouldn't just implicate Delmore. It would expose a surveillance dragnet hidden beneath Eastland's police database, one that recorded more than patrol footage. It included internal memos, message intercepts, GPS tracking overlays of black community leaders, and software plugins linked to federal contracts from a firm labeled Lockridge Intercept. A firm Latchwood used. The same name embedded in Halston Blake's clearance trail. She flinched as her burner phone buzzed. A single text. "They know. They're coming. Get to Eves Hill. You know the path." Her breath caught. Eves Hill wasn't a location. It was a code. A meeting site Drexler, and she had used years ago during a protection detail gone sideways in D.C. It meant no more planning. Go dark. Last fallback. She grabbed the backpack and ran. In D.C., Halston Blake stared at the monitor inside his secure office. He had Drexler's file open. Not the public version. The real one. The one with Latchwood's name at the top. It was all collapsing faster than he expected. He'd warned them. Let Drexler go, issue an apology, wrap it in patriotism, and ride out the storm. But someone in Latchwood's operation had insisted on cleanup. They didn't realize who Drexler was. "Sir," his assistant whispered through the comm, "a leak just hit WRC and Tribune Syndicate. It's encrypted but tied to your tag. You've been named." He stared at the screen. A digital document was already trending on private intelligence channels. The subject line, "Proof of Unlawful Surveillance Network, Eastland to D.C." His badge number was embedded in the packet. This wasn't just fallout. It was a declaration. Blake stood up. He opened the floor safe, removed a small pistol, loaded it slowly. "Get me Latchwood. Now." Drexler didn't stop running until he saw the shape of the crumbling chapel silhouetted against the moon. Eves Hill, once a freedman's church, abandoned in the 60s. Now it was a ruin, half forgotten and overgrown. Lauren was already there. She turned when she saw him, eyes wild, hair soaked in sweat. She'd come the long way. Through the creek, past the old mill. The safe route. He nodded. You okay? No, but we're still alive. They ducked into the ruined vestibule and lit a small oil lamp. The light flickered across dusty stone and crumbling wood. Talk, Drexler said. Everything. Lauren opened her notebook. Inside was a hand-drawn flowchart. At the top, Latchwood. Beneath, a triangle of names, Sheriff Tunney, Ray Delmore, and Evren Kell, a consultant for a defunct energy firm tied to Eastland's development office. They were monitoring not just suspects, but people who spoke out, she said. Church leaders, activists, teachers, anyone who questioned the narrative. And the footage of me? Edited, she said. The full version showed Delmore ignoring your ID twice. Even read it aloud. Drexler's jaw tightened. Why cover it up? He asked. Because they needed a story, she said. They were losing control of the media angle. They didn't want a calm federal agent. They needed a provocation, an excuse for forceful restraint. And Latchwood? She looked down. He runs part of a private security consortium. Off books. Handles high-stakes influence ops. Mostly digital. But sometimes, she trailed off. Drexler finished for her. Sometimes physical. The air grew still. Then came the sound. A crunch outside. A footstep. They both froze. Another step. Closer. Lauren reached for her sidearm. Drexler raised a finger. Wait. Then crash. The chapel door burst open. 3 men in tactical gear swept inside, laser sights flaring in red beams. Drop it, one barked. Now. Lauren fired first. One clean shot into the lantern. Darkness swallowed the room. Gunfire erupted. Stone cracked. Wood splintered. Drexler tackled her through a side exit, both diving into the brambles beyond. They tumbled down a ravine and crawled into a drainage culvert. Not police, Lauren hissed. They moved like ex-military. Drexler's hands were scraped raw. They're not here to arrest us. No, they're here to erase us. Meanwhile, Director Halston Blake stood in front of the mirror in his office. The call with Latchwood had ended. No apologies. Just silence. He knew what that meant. They'd decided he was no longer useful. He stared at himself. Removed his lapel pin. Not like this, he muttered. Then he picked up the second phone, the one buried beneath the floorboard. He dialed a number not in any agency registry. When the voice answered, he said only one thing. I'm ready to talk. 2 days later, in a broadcast that aired during prime time across multiple networks, Halston Blake stood in front of a Senate panel. Calm. Prepared. He laid out the structure of a rogue intelligence outfit operating out of East Lynn and 3 other towns, feeding false reports to federal agencies, creating surveillance dossiers, and staging provocations under a project called Code Equinox. He handed over the names. He handed over the money trails. And when the panel chairman asked him why now, he said, because Agent Drexler stood still when they pointed a gun at him. And they wanted that to look like a threat. Drexler watched the hearing from a safe house. Lauren sat beside him, silent. Outside, the world burned with headlines. Blake names secret network. Hashtag Drexler duty turns to hashtag Code Equinox. East Lynn officers resign in wake of explosive leaks. But Drexler knew this wasn't over. Not yet, because the footage still hadn't fully surfaced. Because Latchwood hadn't fallen. And because somewhere, buried deep inside the documents, was a single line Lauren hadn't translated yet. It referenced a second location, a deeper file, a red route protocol, and a name, Briar Drexler, his niece. He stared at the screen, the world shifting under him again, and whispered, what did they do to her? Drexler sat motionless in the dimly lit room, his eyes locked on the final transmission. The name had stopped him cold. Briar Drexler, his niece, the one person in this twisted mess who hadn't yet been touched. But now, her name was connected to something far darker than any of them could have anticipated. Red Route Protocol. His mind raced. Briar had always been a bright spot, a touchstone in the chaos. She didn't belong in this. Drexler, Lauren said, her voice a tight whisper. She hadn't moved from her spot beside him, eyes scanning through the documents, her fingers stained with ink. She was as tense as he felt, but for a different reason. She was trying to keep her head down, to keep focus, to keep breathing. Briar's name, Drexler muttered, his voice strained. How is this connected? Lauren glanced at him, her face shadowed by disbelief. I don't know, but if she's in the files, it's because someone's using her. His fingers twitched, the sudden urge to smash something running through his veins. His niece, the one person he'd sworn to protect. The last thing he could have imagined was this. He reached for his phone, fingers shaking as he keyed in her number. The dial tone droned in his ear, a brief moment of false hope before it cut to voicemail. He hit end and dialed again. Then again. Nothing. Shit, he muttered. She's not picking up. Lauren leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. You know where she might be? Drexler didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood up, pacing the length of the room, his mind working overtime. Briar was an easy target. She was active online, had a voice, a small but loyal following of students and activists. She'd been part of peaceful protests. She'd written letters to newspapers. Publicly, she was an unassuming, intelligent young woman. But under the surface, that made her dangerous to the people who operated in the shadows. Briar could be anywhere, he said finally, his voice cold and distant. But if they've connected her to Redroot, they'll have her in their sights. Lauren's face tightened. Who are they, Drexler? Who the hell are we dealing with here? He met her gaze, his eyes hardening with the weight of it all. I don't know yet, but whoever it is, they've been planning this for years. Latchwood was just the tip of the iceberg. He grabbed his jacket and pulled it on, pacing back and forth as his thoughts spiraled. There was something about Briar's involvement that didn't sit right. Something beyond the files, beyond Redroot. He knew her well, and this wasn't the type of work she'd get involved with. She was driven by a moral compass that was always pointed north. Always right. But then there was the possibility that she had been caught in the net of something bigger. A larger scheme. One so embedded that she might not even know it. Lauren pushed a pile of documents aside and rose to her feet. If she's at risk, we have to move fast. If Redroot's what I think it is, they'll have her close. Somewhere they control. Drexler stopped mid-step. The realization hit him like a thunderclap. He turned on his heel. Shit. Drexler, what is it? Lauren's voice was sharp now, her instincts as a former agent kicking in. Redroot's not just a protocol. It's a location. A black site. A place where they've been pulling people like Briar, off the radar. Lauren's eyes widened. She had always prided herself on her instincts, her ability to connect dots quicker than anyone else. But even she hadn't seen this coming. A site? And you think she's there? I don't know, he said, the words choking in his throat. But if they're using her name, it's not a coincidence. Briar's too vocal, too visible. They can't have her exposed. Lauren's jaw set hard. Then we find her. Drexler didn't have time to argue. His focus was locked on something far deeper now. They weren't just dealing with local corruption or a rogue network. They were up against an unseen, manipulative force. Someone who used people like Briar as pawns in a game no one understood. He moved quickly, grabbing his bag and tossing it over his shoulder. The urgency in his movements matched the intensity in his eyes. Where are we going? Lauren asked. To the only place where Redroot might actually exist, he replied. A place buried under layers of bureaucracy, hidden in plain sight. East Lynn itself. The drive was silent. Drexler's mind was already miles ahead, connecting dots, running through possibilities. Lauren was beside him, her posture stiff with the weight of the situation, but she didn't say anything. The road stretched ahead, empty but for the occasional flicker of headlights. When they crossed the town line, Drexler felt a cold rush of tension. This place, East Lynn, wasn't just a backdrop. It was the heart of this corruption. The quiet, small-town facade that had concealed so much for so long. They parked at the edge of town. Drexler's eyes scanned the darkened streets, his mind working, his gut gnawing with a sense of dread. We'll have to go underground, he said, his voice low. This place is crawling with people who know we're here. Lauren nodded and followed him as they moved through the shadows. The buildings loomed ahead, their dark windows reflecting the occasional flash of their flashlight beams. They reached an old, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, where it had once been a loading dock for a now-defunct factory. The building had been empty for years, its peeling paint and broken windows hidden from public sight. As they approached the entrance, Drexler felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Then a soft sound, barely audible, cracked the air. A whisper. Drexler? He froze. Lauren was already reaching for her weapon, but Drexler stopped her with a hand. Briar? His voice cracked slightly, though he fought to keep it steady. Out of the darkness, a figure emerged. A shadow, small but unmistakable. Briar. She stepped into the dim light. Her clothes were torn, her hair disheveled, but she wasn't hurt. She looked at him with wide eyes. "Uncle Quentin," she whispered. "I didn't mean to drag you into this." Drexler's heart stopped. "You didn't," he started, but the words faltered. Briar's face tightened, fear washing over her features. "I've been trying to stop it, but they're everywhere. And now it's too late. Redroot is already working." Drexler felt the world shift beneath him. The game had changed. They weren't just up against a system anymore. They were up against something far worse. "We have to get out of here," Briar said urgently, grabbing his arm. "They know you're coming." "Who?" Drexler demanded. "Who's behind this?" Briar's eyes darted around, fear clear in her gaze. "There's no time. They'll come for all of us." And then a flash, a silhouette in the distance. Drexler turned, his heart racing, as the sound of footsteps closing in grew louder. The footsteps came faster, closer. Briar's grip tightened on Drexler's arm. Her breath was shallow, panicked. She had been running from them for days, weeks, maybe even longer. The shadows in the alley stretched longer now, as if the night itself were conspiring against them. "We have to move," Briar said, her voice shaking. "Now." Drexler didn't hesitate. He motioned for Lauren to take cover, his instincts kicking in. There was no more time for questions, no more time for strategy. The people they were up against had been waiting for this moment. They had been one step ahead the whole time. Drexler pulled Briar behind him as they ducked into a side corridor. His mind raced, spinning through the possibilities, trying to find an escape route. But there was only one way out. And it wasn't going to be easy. "What's going on?" Lauren hissed, her voice urgent as she crouched beside him. "Drexler, who are they?" He barely had time to answer before the first shot rang out. The bullet hit the ground near Briar, sending a jagged spray of gravel up into the air. Drexler instinctively shielded her with his body, pressing her against the wall as more shots followed. Lauren returned fire, but the distance was too great, and the shooters too numerous. "We're pinned," Lauren shouted, ducking behind a stack of crates. "We need a plan." Drexler's eyes darted around the alley, searching for any advantage. But they were surrounded. They had walked into a trap, and now there was no easy way out. The heavy clatter of boots on concrete was getting closer. A team was closing in from the rear, trapping them. "There's no plan," Drexler muttered under his breath. "We fight." He glanced down at Briar, who was wide-eyed, clutching his sleeve. She didn't belong in this fight. He knew that, but there was no turning back now. Not for her. Not for him. Not for anyone. "Stay close," Drexler ordered. "Keep your head down. We're getting out of here." The first man appeared from the shadows, his gun raised. A flash of recognition passed through Drexler's mind. He'd seen this face before. But now wasn't the time to dwell on it. Lauren's shot rang out, striking the man in the shoulder. He dropped, but not before firing off a wild shot. The bullet grazed Drexler's arm, and he hissed in pain. Blood trickled down his sleeve, but it didn't matter. They couldn't stop now. More men emerged, this time from both ends of the alley. It was clear they were professionals, highly trained, well-coordinated. Drexler's mind raced. They couldn't fight their way out of this, not with Briar in tow. They had to think. They had to be smarter. A moment of clarity hit him. "Lauren, get to the truck!" Drexler barked. "I'll cover you. Get Briar out of here." Lauren didn't question it. She moved swiftly, her movements precise as she took cover behind a nearby dumpster. Briar looked at Drexler, fear in her eyes. "Uncle Quentin, no. You can't." "I'll be fine," Drexler said, his voice harsh but firm. "Go now. We don't have time to argue." Briar hesitated, but Drexler's expression was stone cold. There was no room for doubt, no room for hesitation. With a final, terrified glance, Briar turned and sprinted toward Lauren, who was already halfway to the truck. Drexler's gaze stayed fixed on the incoming threat. The men in the alley were closing in, but Drexler was ready. His training, his years of experience, kicked in. He dropped low, darting between the shadows, firing as he moved. His shots were precise, aimed at disabling, not killing. It wasn't about ending lives, it was about survival. The first man fell, a bullet to the leg. The second man wasn't so lucky. Drexler's bullet struck him square in the chest. The third and fourth men paused, momentarily stunned by the speed and accuracy of his shots. But there was no time to dwell on it. He had to keep moving. As Lauren and Briar reached the truck, Drexler sprinted toward them, moving faster than he'd ever moved before. He could hear the men gaining on him, the sounds of pursuit growing louder, closer. He reached the truck just as a shot grazed his side, leaving a deep, burning wound. "Get in!" Lauren shouted, her voice sharp with urgency. Now! Briar was already in the passenger seat, her eyes wide with fear. She looked like she was about to collapse, but Drexler didn't have time to comfort her. He jumped into the back, slamming the door shut as the truck roared to life. The tires screeched as Lauren slammed the accelerator to the floor. Drexler barely had time to catch his breath before he heard the distinct sound of more shots ringing out, followed by the unmistakable screech of tires behind them. "They're right behind us," Lauren shouted, eyes fixed on the road. "We can't outrun them like this." Drexler gritted his teeth, his body aching with pain. But his mind was clear. They needed a plan. They needed an edge. And they had one. "We're not running," Drexler said, his voice cold and focused. "We're setting a trap." Lauren glanced at him, confusion in her eyes. "What are you talking about?" Drexler didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for the emergency brake, pulling it up with a swift yank. The truck's tires screeched as it swerved across the road, narrowly avoiding a head-on collision with an incoming vehicle. The sudden maneuver threw the pursuing car off balance, causing it to skid to the side. But Drexler wasn't done. He grabbed a satchel from the back seat, pulling out a series of small explosive charges, the kind used to disable vehicles. He had used them before many times, but never in a situation like this. "We're going to stop them," Drexler said, his voice low and dangerous. "We'll do it now." As the truck raced toward a narrow stretch of road, Drexler positioned the charges at key points, strategically placing them in the path of the pursuing vehicles. It was a risk, a gamble, but it was the only chance they had. Lauren's grip tightened on the steering wheel, her knuckles white. "This is insane." Drexler nodded. Sometimes, insane is the only way out. The pursuing cars were closing in fast, their headlights blinding in the rearview mirror. Drexler's heart pounded, each beat fueling the fire in his chest. This was it. Lauren hit the gas, and the truck surged forward, crashing through the barricade of trees ahead. Drexler held his breath, eyes locked on the road behind them. A heartbeat later, the explosion shattered the silence. The blast was deafening. The pursuing vehicles were consumed by fire and smoke, their momentum halted in an instant. Drexler felt the shockwave hit them, the truck lurching as it sped forward. "We did it," Briar whispered, her voice barely audible over the roar of the engine. Drexler didn't answer. He wasn't sure what he was feeling: relief, exhaustion, anger. All of it. But there was one thing he knew for sure. They weren't out of the woods yet. As the truck sped down the road, the night seemed to close in on them. The danger wasn't gone. It had only just begun. And the real battle, the one for Briar's future, for their survival, was only starting.